Since you say you use the word evil, and I for years now I've been being contacted by people who use the word evil. And they talk about this being about good and evil, light and dark, right and wrong.
Mm.
Uh, I find it. I initially found it very difficult to conceptualize evil. I did. I thought we're getting away from the everyday world here that I've inhabited for all of these decades. We're now moving into terrain into which I have not really previously stepped or explored. But that word comes at me too often now for me to. Well, I certainly won't dismiss it out of hand. Do you feel that we're dealing with actual malevolence, actual evil, that rather than us just being caught in the cogs of a big machine for which we are just,
Mm.
dots on spreadsheets, flashing lights on screens, do you detect evil intent?
Yeah, I don't just feel it, I know it. I've spent time, I've done the research, and it is full, unadulterated evil that we are confronting right now. And when we're referring to a global elite, a small group of people that have amassed power over almost the entire world, the kind of evil that can control the media and compel the human race into action, knowing that it is going to harm them, the kind of evil that can tell a global lie and get away with it and not even care that you're harming. And this is really, for me, the litmus test: children. Like, are you so evil? You created this virus in a lab. I'm convinced they've been creating viruses in labs for a very long time. You release this upon the population. You are able to modify human behavior on the basis of it. You've got grandmothers dying alone. Okay. Can we leave the kids out of it? No, they tried to compel children to get this vaccine. They knew that young people were getting myocarditis. They knew, and they censored that information, and the journalists helped them. So at the top, you have evil. In between there, you have greed, right? So you go, why would a journalist who knows that what they're saying is not true, be writing these hit pieces, calling people anti-vax? Well, they're being compelled by greed. We know that Pfizer was sponsoring. I mean, you have CNN say something and then a Pfizer commercial would come out, right? Via advertisements, keeping these people afloat. And most people then, beyond the evil, beyond the greed, you then have a large category of people that are just cowards, right? And their behavior is being modified by the madness of crowds, which is to say, well, I don't want to be the person not wearing a mask. I don't want to be the person that stands out. And I was just like, nope, not happening. It's just not going to happen. And I was strong on that. I mean, I wouldn't even allow people. I'm like, this is my home. If you're going to wear a mask, you can't come over. My children are not going to see people wearing masks. I'm not going to accept this as the new normal. So it's a combination of all of that. But at the top, it's evil.
Because I look on it what's happening or I've been looking on at what's happening in Ukraine. And I've been paying close attention to it and talking to people about it from the start. And because of the loss of trust that I'd experienced during COVID, I was instantly suspicious about what was happening in Ukraine. It seemed too convenient that they suddenly had this upon which to focus everyone's attention. And by now, and of course, I watched our own, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson as the NATO bag carrier who went out and scuppered the peace deal, which was already on the table, and that has led, well, directly really to. Well, I was talking to Colonel Douglas Macgregor the other night, and he was quoting a figure of 600,000 Ukrainian dead, and then there's Russian dead on top of that, and. And then I look at what's happening in Gaza, and that the brunt of the suffering there, and the most of the dying is women and children and babies, and that I live in a world that's blithely looking on at both of those sequences of events unfolding, and it's like watching a car crash in slow motion and being unable to do anything to stop it. And
Yeah.
you say children and you say evil, And the motivations behind those things, increasingly, I find it impossible to deny, but that it's malevolent intent.
Mm-hmm. We installed, after a color revolution, a leader in Ukraine that we could control. That leader was then followed up by another leader who was an actor, which is an actor, Zelensky, and he is still an actor, right? And he's a bad faith actor. What's happening in Ukraine is what has happened in Ukraine before. There's nothing new under the sun. It is a Christian genocide. They are intentionally mass murdering men in an unwinnable war, Christian men being dragged from their homes, thrown into vans against their will. To what end, I am unsure, but what he's doing, I have no question about. It is a genocide of Christian men that's happening, with the full blessing of the mainstream media. Their job is to convince the Western world that this is really happening because of big evil Russia, and not because they have more Machiavellian plans afoot there. The Gaza situation for me it is shocking for me because of how many men have platforms now. Like, you wonder, how could somebody sit back and allow this? We have X. You're seeing the footage. You're hearing the mothers screaming in pain. You have doctors that are writing pieces telling you that this is an annihilation. I've been in war zones. I went out there, Doctors Without Borders, and I'm telling you this is an intentional annihilation. You have the footage and it looks like Dresden. And you are just going to accept the narrative that the media is telling you, that there is just children and women, everyone's being used as a human shield. What is that? Well, on one end, it's greed, people knowing where their bread is buttered and knowing that if you take a different perspective, you'll lose your job. And on the other hand, it's cowardice. I always see these two things. It's between these two things. I just am going to stay away from that narrative because I've got kids and I've got to feed my children. And I understand that the media is only allowed to have one perspective. I don't know that when you enter the big court, like when you are going to have to account for your life before God, if greed and cowardice are going to cut it, when you have to explain why you had a platform and said nothing as you watched women and children and their homes be annihilated.
Do you think, Candace, that it is Christianity? You mentioned Christian men in Ukraine. Do you think Christianity, in particular, is in the crosshairs? Do you
It's
think
always been within the
Christianity
crosshairs.
is the obstacle?
Yes, and it's always been that way. And the more that I got into real history and got out of I deprogrammed myself and recognized that virtually everything that I was told was an intentional partial illustration or an outright lie in terms of learning history. I then began to read books, and the more that I got into actual history, it brought me to faith. And I've realized there's a reason these groups went after the Bible and used to teach the Bible. That was just a mainstream thing that was taught in school. That got taken out of the school system. That was no longer being taught because that is the story of man. And then they wanted to usher in this era of scientism, as C.S. Lewis refers to it as, to replace God with the concept of science, making people think that they come from apes. Everything can be explained by a scientist and trust the experts. And there you had generations not even realizing that they were subjecting themselves to a demonic antichrist narrative where man is placed at the center. We started worshiping man. Various men, a form of paganism, really, and minting these people like Dr. Fauci as gods. And the more that I looked into history, I realized that there is a Christian conspiracy, so to speak, where everything they have done has been to divide up the church, to attack the church, and to sell you a different narrative as to why. I mean, I'll take it a step further. Now, when I examine all of these wars that are happening in the Middle East, I am certain that the reason is because they are bombing the oldest. We have been bombing nonstop in the West, the oldest places. I mean, we're talking Syria, Afghanistan, and there are priests speaking out saying they keep bombing all of these old architectures, all of these old churches, all of these things that hold real history. Well, yeah, you got to wipe away history if you're going to plan on presenting an Orwellian future where there is no such thing as history and it's just this ever present. I think that is the reason why they are after in Iraq, in Iran, in, like I said, Syria. Nobody knows what we're doing in Syria. Why we've just been bombing Syria into oblivion, and because the history holds the answers to the future.
And so it the whole thing. This is what I find. I feel unmoored. I feel as if the lines that held me in place and gave me the security of being able to understand where I was and how I fitted in. I feel as if all of that's been cut away, and that I now find myself having conversations about evil and about faith and about Christianity. I wonder if it isn't the necessary step you to get beneath or behind what you describe as the matrix, and to get back to some of these fundamental places and look at them again as though for the first time. Like Syria and Iraq, these places where deep history is embedded, and even deeper history closer by. I wonder if that's part of the necessary recovery that we need to get away from this matrix.
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons why I was baptized Catholic. I think they've been holding a candle for a very long time. It's why Catholics are so hated. And even that was a very careful, evil operation to dissuade, and I'm speaking about America, but obviously also in the UK, to dissuade the West against the Catholic Church, because they know real history. They've been keeping it for thousands of years. And yes, it has always been a holy war. Everything else is just materialistic and surface. You what you're being told, it's all surface, and they're intentionally giving you all of this information and no real information. Once you begin to examine world events through the lens of a holy war, things suddenly make a lot more sense. And you will find yourself, at the moment that you begin speaking about faith, under attack from the mainstream media. What is divided cannot stand.
Who's winning? If it's a holy war, if it's a war of faith, who's got the upper hand?
Goodness always wins in the end, and that is the reality, because truth always wins, defeats a lie. A lie can only win temporarily. That's why they say a lie makes its way around the world before the truth puts its shoes on in the morning. But once the truth is there, it's the truth. It's inexorable. And I think that is what is terrifying the elite, because they have so carefully laid this illusion, because that's what it is. Everything you start to come to terms with has been one great illusion. And once you become sober to that, you become a threat to the establishment. And which is why I go back to that analogy of the Matrix. Everyone becomes a Neo, and they're able to see through and cut through all of the lies. And when I examine like Agent Smith, that replica, chasing Neo throughout the entire movie, I see that as the mainstream media. Right? Okay, we're going to get you. You can't be doing that. You can't wake up the masses. We need everybody asleep. We need everybody to be plugged into this. This is a threat to our code.
You've been you're so under the cosh, under the gun, and have been for a sustained period of time, in terms of censorship, in terms of silence, in terms of these kind of attacks that are leveled at you. Whence comes the strength and the determination to just look it in the eye?
The Bible, faith, and family. And it's weird how optimistic I am. I always think that it would drive them crazy if they knew how happy I was, despite their never-ending attacks, because I see it falling apart. I know that they're writing this way about me because they're fearful. They see it. They know goodness is awake now. And they know the truth is putting its shoes on. And there's only so many articles you can write calling everybody a Nazi apologist and a racist and a homophobe and a transphobe, and it's not landing anymore. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy knowing that what is real can't be threatened. They have no power over me because they don't have real power. They have an illusion of power, and that illusion has worked for a long time. But real power comes from faith, and real power comes from the home.